Karen pepper-sprayed a royal guard directly in the face, thinking he would break formation and react. But what happened in the next 10 seconds left the entire crowd in shocked silence. Her smug smile vanished as she realized she had completely misjudged the situation. No one expected what came next. Now, before we get into the full story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow at this very same time, we're dropping another powerful Royal Guard story that you won't want to miss. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Horse Guards Parade as Staff Sergeant Nathan Marwood assumed his position for the day's ceremonial guard duty. The historic grounds, once the site of royal jousting tournaments, now served as one of London's most photographed military ceremonies. At 32, Marwood was a decorated veteran with 10 years of distinguished service in the King's Guard. His scarlet tunic was impeccably pressed, brass buttons gleaming against the morning light, and his bearskin cap sat perfectly aligned above steel blue eyes that had seen far more than most civilians could imagine. The early morning inspection had been particularly thorough, with the regimental sergeant major checking every buckle, strap and seam before declaring the guards fit for public duty. Marwood had served 3 tours in conflict zones before being selected for ceremonial duties. The battlefield experience had honed his situational awareness to near superhuman levels, a skill that served him equally well amid the unpredictable crush of tourists as it had in combat. He could remain perfectly motionless for hours while cataloguing every movement around him, a talent that had saved his life and those of his unit members during an ambush in Helmand Province 4 years earlier. This ceremony represents 5 centuries of British military tradition, a tour guide explained to her group nearby. The guards you see are not actors or ceremonial figures. They are active duty soldiers, many with extensive combat experience. As the tourists nodded appreciatively, a sharp voice cut through the respectful murmurs of the crowd. "Excuse me, coming through. I paid good money for this trip, and I'm not missing my photo opportunity." A woman in her mid-40s with highlighted blonde hair, styled in an angular bob, pushed her way through the orderly queue of visitors. Her designer sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown, and her manicured nails clutched an expensive smartphone already positioned for the perfect shot. Melanie Carson, an executive assistant from Phoenix, Arizona, had been in London for 3 days and had already registered complaints at her hotel, 2 restaurants, and the London Eye for what she deemed substandard service. Her TripAdvisor account was littered with 1- and 2-star reviews of establishments across 3 continents, each detailing perceived slights against her customer experience. Now, she was determined to get the perfect photo with a royal guard, regardless of the clearly marked barriers or the posted signs requesting visitors to maintain a respectful distance. Her itinerary, meticulously planned with military precision, quite unlike her respect for actual military personnel, allowed exactly 22 minutes for this particular attraction before she needed to move on to Westminster Abbey. "Ma'am, please stay behind the rope line," a uniformed attendant requested politely. "Do you know how much this vacation is costing me?" Melanie retorted, barely glancing at the young man as she positioned herself for a better angle. Marwood remained motionless, staring straight ahead as he'd been trained to do. His peripheral vision tracked Melanie's movements as she jostled other tourists aside, her entitlement radiating like a beacon. In his decade of service, he'd encountered hundreds of difficult visitors, but something in this woman's demeanour suggested she might be more troublesome than most. "I can't believe they make these guys just stand here like toys," Melanie remarked loudly to no one in particular, positioning her expensive camera for another photo. "It's ridiculous that my tax dollars pay for this." "Actually, ma'am," an elderly gentleman with a military bearing corrected gently, "unless you're a British taxpayer, you're not funding Her Majesty's Guard, and these men are soldiers, not entertainments." Melanie shot him a withering look. "I didn't ask for a history lesson." The retired colonel, his posture and regimental tie marking him as clearly as if he wore a uniform, nodded politely and stepped back, but his eyes remained watchful. The Battle of Goose Green medal, discreetly pinned to his lapel, caught the morning light. His wife, Margaret, squeezed his arm in silent communication, a gesture born of 50 years of marriage. She recognized the subtle tightening of his jaw, the same expression he'd worn when receiving junior officers who had failed to maintain proper standards during his command years. "Steady on, Harold," she whispered, with the practiced calm of a woman who had spent decades navigating the invisible currents of military protocol. "Not our circus, not our monkeys." Harold's lips twitched in a suppressed smile at their long-standing private joke for difficult civilians, but his posture remained alert. As the queue properly moved forward, Melanie repeatedly sidestepped the orderly line, earning glares from those patiently waiting their turn. When a palace attendant politely directed her to rejoin the queue, she responded with a dismissive wave. "I'm just getting a proper photo. It'll take 2 seconds if everyone would stop getting in my way." Sergeant Marwood catalogued every movement within his field of vision while maintaining his ceremonial stance. 10 years of service had taught him to identify potential problems early, and this particular visitor had triggered his internal warning system. Her disregard for protocols, her increasingly aggressive tone, and her determination to be exceptional among the ordinary tourists all marked her as someone to monitor carefully. A young couple with matching university sweatshirts tried to maneuver around Melanie as she blocked their photo opportunity. "Excuse us," the young man said politely. "We were just hoping to—" "I'm not done yet," Melanie cut him off, repositioning herself directly in front of Marwood. "These guards are here for visitors, and I'm visiting." She raised her voice for her next comment, clearly intended for Marwood to hear. "Though I don't know why they can't at least smile or acknowledge people. It's just basic customer service." The university couple retreated, the young woman whispering something about "not worth the hassle" to her companion. Behind them, other tourists began to murmur about the disruptive behavior, but most chose to simply work around the problem rather than confront it directly. "Excuse me," Melanie approached a tour guide who was explaining the history of the horse guards to a fascinated group. "Why are there so many restrictions around these guards? I paid for the full London experience, not to look at them from a distance." The tour guide, Emma Phillips, who had been conducting historical tours for 15 years, maintained her professional demeanour despite the interruption. "The barriers exist for the protection of both the guards and visitors," she explained patiently. "These are serving soldiers performing an official duty, not actors in a theme park." "That's ridiculous," Melanie scoffed. "They're just standing there. It's not like they're doing anything important." A muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in Emma's jaw, but her voice remained calm. "Staff Sergeant Marwood and his colleagues are carrying out ceremonial duties that represent centuries of tradition. Additionally, they are armed service members. The restrictions are both for ceremonial integrity and security purposes." "Wait, that guy has a real gun?" Melanie's eyes narrowed as she assessed Marwood with renewed interest. "I thought it was all just for show." "The weapons are ceremonial but functional," Emma confirmed, then quickly redirected the conversation. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to continue with my group." Melanie returned to the viewing area, her gaze fixed on Marwood with a calculating expression. "So they're supposed to maintain discipline no matter what happens," she mused aloud. "That seems like a challenge." "It's not a challenge, it's respect for tradition," an American man in his 60s interjected. "My father served in the military, and discipline like this represents the higher standards of service. It's not a game." "I didn't ask for your opinion," Melanie replied sharply. "I'm just trying to get my money's worth from this tourist attraction." Rain clouds gathered overhead as Melanie's behaviour progressed from merely annoying to actively disruptive. The first drops spattered against the cobblestones, prompting most tourists to open umbrellas or don raincoats. A group of Japanese tourists withdrew to the covered viewing area, their guide explaining in hushed tones about the guards' unwavering commitment regardless of weather conditions. A father lifted his young son onto his shoulders, explaining, "See how they don't move, even in the rain. That's what we call discipline." The boy nodded solemnly, clearly impressed by the guard's stoicism in the face of increasingly uncomfortable conditions. "I cannot believe how boring this is," Melanie declared loudly, pulling a small aerosol canister from her designer purse and fidgeting with the safety cap. "Nobody told me these guards were just going to stand there like mannequins. I've seen more interactive displays at Madame Tussauds." She checked her watch impatiently, muttering about wasted time and underwhelming British attractions. Harold, the retired colonel, recognized the distinctive shape immediately. "Pepper spray," he murmured to his wife. "This could become problematic very quickly." "Shouldn't someone stop her?" his wife whispered back anxiously. "Security is already moving in," Harold assured her, noting the methodical approach of the uniformed officers. "Let's hope they reach her before she does something foolish." The rain intensified, and most of the crowd retreated further under the covered viewing area, creating an unintentional spotlight on Melanie as she stood alone at the barrier, the canister now clearly visible in her hand. "I wonder if you're actually human under all that ceremony," she said, her voice carrying a challenging edge. "Let's find out, shall we?" With a swift movement that caught even the approaching security officers by surprise, Melanie ducked under the barrier rope and stepped into the restricted area. The crowd's collective gasp created a momentary vacuum of silence before urgent whispers erupted. "Ma'am, stop immediately!" a security officer called out, quickening his pace. Melanie ignored the command, advancing towards Sergeant Marwood with the determined stride of someone accustomed to getting her way. The distance between them closed rapidly. 10 feet, then 5. "Let's see how disciplined you really are," she announced, her voice carrying across the now hushed parade ground. "I've dealt with plenty of men who think they're untouchable." Marwood remained perfectly still, his training and experience allowing his mind to race through potential responses, while his body maintained the ceremonial stillness required of his post. His peripheral vision tracked the security personnel approaching from both sides, calculating their arrival time against Melanie's rapid advance. "Do they train you to be this robotic, or were you born without personality?" Melanie taunted, now standing directly before him, close enough that her breath fogged in the cool air between them. "Hello? Anyone home in there?" Melanie reached out and waved her hand inches from Marwood's face. When this elicited no response, her expression hardened from provocative to angry. "Really? Nothing? What are you, some kind of machine?" The security officers were now just seconds away, moving with the controlled urgency of trained professionals aware of the delicate balance between ceremonial protocol and visitor safety. "This is ridiculous," Melanie declared loudly. "I came all this way to see the famous guards, and you're just glorified statues." She turned toward the crowd, the pepper spray canister now prominently displayed in her right hand. "I carry this for protection back home," she announced. "Never had to use it, but I've always wondered how effective it actually is." "Ma'am, put that down immediately," the closest security officer commanded, now just steps away. "You are in violation of multiple regulations and potentially committing a criminal offence." Melanie's head snapped toward the officer, her expression registering surprise that her actions were being treated with such seriousness. "I'm just joking around," she protested, though she didn't lower the canister. "It's not like I'm actually going to—" Whatever justification she intended to offer was lost as she turned back toward Marwood and made the decision that would change the course of her London vacation irrevocably. With a quick movement that suggested both impulse and intent, she raised the canister and sprayed directly at Marwood's face. The caustic cloud enveloped the guard's features, the chemical compound designed to incapacitate through intense pain and involuntary eye closure. For a frozen moment, it seemed as though time itself held its breath. "Oh my God!" a woman in the crowd screamed. "She actually did it!" "He's been attacked," another voice called out. "Someone help him!" Security officers converged from all directions, moving now with urgent purpose rather than measured approach. The elderly colonel vaulted the barrier with surprising agility for his age, his military instincts overriding civilian protocols. Melanie stood in apparent shock at her own actions, the pepper spray still clutched in her hand as reality caught up with her impulsive decision. I wasn't really going to, she stammered, backing away from Marwood. Drop the canister and place your hands behind your back, the lead security officer ordered Melanie, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. You are being detained for assault on military personnel. It was just a joke, Melanie protested, her voice rising with the first notes of panic. Everyone tries to make the guards react. I didn't think it would be such a big deal. Assaulting a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces is indeed a big deal, madam, the officer replied coldly as his colleague secured the pepper spray canister in an evidence bag. One with serious legal consequences. As security personnel took control of Melanie, all eyes turned towards Sergeant Marwood, the victim of this unprecedented attack. The crowd collectively held its breath, waiting to see the guards' reaction to this extraordinary breach of both protocol and basic human decency. What happened next would be recounted in London pubs and social gatherings for months to come. Despite direct exposure to military-grade pepper spray, a chemical compound designed to immediately incapacitate through searing pain and temporary blindness, Staff Sergeant Nathan Marwood did not break position. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the chemical agent dripped down Marwood's face, some of it mixing with raindrops to create rivulets of burning solution that traced patterns across his cheeks. The pepper spray's distinctive odour, sharp and caustic, spread through the immediate area, causing several nearby tourists to cough and cover their noses. But through it all, Marwood's eyes remained open, though visibly reddened and surely burning with an intensity that would have dropped most civilians to their knees. His posture didn't falter by so much as a millimetre. Not a tremor in his white-gloved hands, not a shift in his precisely positioned feet. The only indication that he had been affected at all was a slight increase in his breathing rate, visible in the measured rise and fall of his chest beneath his scarlet tunic, and perhaps a nearly imperceptible tightening around his eyes as his highly trained mind compartmentalized the searing pain without surrendering to it. "My God," whispered Harold, the retired colonel, "that's extraordinary discipline." "How is that even possible?" someone in the crowd asked. "That spray would drop most people instantly." Several nearby tourists were coughing and covering their faces as the chemical cloud drifted in the light rain. Security personnel quickly began moving people back to a safe distance, while medical responders approached with cautious urgency. "Sir, you require immediate medical attention," a paramedic addressed Marwood directly, protocol temporarily superseded by medical necessity. "Please allow us to treat you." For 10 long seconds, Marwood gave no indication he had heard the request. Then, with military precision, he responded without moving his head or shifting his gaze. "I am on active duty, sir. I will require my commanding officer's permission to stand down." The paramedic exchanged glances with the security team leader, both clearly unprepared for this level of commitment to duty. "The chemical agent could cause permanent damage to your eyes if not treated promptly," the paramedic explained. "Noted, sir," Marwood acknowledged, his voice betraying only the slightest rasp from the irritation. "But protocol must be maintained." Meanwhile, Melanie had been secured by security personnel and was being escorted toward the administrative offices, her protests growing increasingly desperate as she realized the seriousness of her situation. "I want to speak to the American embassy," she demanded, struggling against the firm grip of the officers. "You can't treat me like this. I'm an American citizen." "Your citizenship doesn't exempt you from British law, madam," the officer informed her coolly. "You've committed assault against military personnel, an offence that carries significant penalties." A commanding officer arrived within minutes, approaching Marwood with respectful urgency. "Sergeant Marwood, report your condition," he ordered, professional concern evident in his voice. "Chemical irritant to face and eyes," sir, Marwood reported precisely. Breathing affected but manageable. Vision impaired but functional. Medical attention is standing by, Sergeant. You are relieved of post. Only then, with proper military authorization, did Marwood acknowledge his relief with a crisp salute before allowing the medical team to guide him to a treatment area. Even in his withdrawal, he maintained perfect posture and controlled movements, refusing the arm offered for support. The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause as Marwood departed, their admiration for his extraordinary discipline overwhelming even British reserve. Children who had watched the scene unfold stared wide-eyed, witnessing a lesson in duty and commitment more powerful than any classroom instruction could provide. Palace security had established a perimeter around the incident area with remarkable efficiency. Melanie Carson sat in a Spartan interview room within the administrative complex, the gravity of her situation finally beginning to register. "I'd like to clarify exactly what's happening," she said to the police inspector who had arrived to take charge of the case. "This seems like an overreaction to what was essentially a misunderstanding." Inspector Davies, a 20-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police with specific training in diplomatic incidents, regarded her with professional detachment. "Ms. Carson, you deliberately crossed a security barrier and assaulted a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces with a prohibited chemical agent. There is no misunderstanding, to clarify." A palace security officer entered with a tablet computer. "Inspector, we've retrieved the CCTV footage of the incident. Would you like to review it now?" The inspector nodded, and the officer placed the tablet on the table, cueing the video to play. The high-definition security camera had captured the entire sequence with damning clarity. Melanie's increasingly aggressive behaviour, her deliberate barrier crossing, and the premeditated pepper spray attack, all rendered in irrefutable detail. "As you can see, Ms. Carson, your actions were clearly deliberate and unprovoked," Davies observed as the footage concluded. "Sergeant Marwood made no movement, issued no challenge, and presented no threat whatsoever." Melanie stared at the screen, seeing her behaviour through external eyes for the first time. "I didn't realise how it would look," she said quietly. "Back home, everyone jokes about making these guards react." "Sergeant Marwood is not employed for your entertainment," Davies stated firmly. "He is a decorated combat veteran performing an official military function." In the medical facility, Sergeant Marwood was receiving treatment for chemical exposure. Despite the pain, he provided his own statement with military precision, neither exaggerating the assault nor minimizing its impact. "The subject approached with clear intent to provoke a response," he reported to the military police officer assigned to the case. "When verbal provocations proved ineffective, she escalated to physical assault using a chemical agent." As the investigation progressed, details about Sergeant Marwood's background emerged that transformed the public narrative surrounding the incident. The Palace Press Office released a carefully worded statement about the attacked guard. "Staff Sergeant Nathan Marwood is a decorated combat veteran with multiple tours of duty," the statement read. "During his second deployment, Sergeant Marwood's unit was subjected to a chemical attack. His exemplary actions during that incident earned him the Military Cross for Valour under extreme duress." The revelation spread quickly among the tourists who had witnessed the pepper spray attack. Harold, the retired colonel, provided additional context to those gathered near him. "Chemical warfare training is standard for all combat units," he explained to the rapt listeners, "but Marwood's actual experience in a chemical attack would have given him extraordinary psychological preparation for what happened today. Still, his composure was remarkable by any military standard." In the security office, Inspector Davies had received the briefing about Marwood's background and was now viewing the incident through an even more serious lens. When he returned to the interview room where Melanie waited, his demeanour had noticeably cooled. "Ms. Carson, I have been authorised to inform you that the Crown Prosecution Service will be proceeding with charges of assault on military personnel, possession of an offensive weapon, and disruption of a ceremonial guard post. These charges collectively carry potential penalties of up to 5 years' imprisonment." Melanie's face crumpled. 5 years? For a stupid mistake. I didn't know. The sergeant you attacked, Davies continued, is a combat veteran who previously survived a chemical weapons attack while protecting civilians. The same training and discipline that kept him alive in combat allowed him to maintain his post despite your assault. His eyes continued to burn while you were demanding to speak to the American embassy. For the first time since her arrival in London, Melanie Carson appeared genuinely speechless, the reality of her actions and their consequences finally penetrating her self-centered worldview. Officers reviewing Melanie's personal effects had discovered multiple attempted photographs and recordings on her phone, including several where she clearly narrated her intentions to make one of these robots show they're human. Premeditation is clearly established, the evidence officer noted in his report. Subject documented her escalating attempts to provoke a reaction from ceremonial guards at multiple London locations over the previous 2 days. After receiving medical clearance, Sergeant Marwood returned to the barracks where his fellow guards greeted him with the understated respect that characterises military recognition of exceptional conduct. There were no grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Simply the quiet acknowledgement of comrades who understood the discipline his actions had required. As he entered the common room, several guards rose slightly from their seats, not quite standing at attention, but a subtle sign of respect that spoke volumes in the economy of military gestures. A space appeared for him at the table, and a cup of tea materialized without comment. One senior guard silently slid across a tin of special-issue eye drops developed for combat situations, a silent acknowledgement of shared discomfort that needed no verbal explanation. Another guard, a lanky Scotsman from Aberdeen, simply nodded and said, "Proper job today, Marwood," which, coming from the normally taciturn man, was equivalent to an effusive speech. The quiet solidarity of the guard's mess enveloped him like a familiar uniform. No fuss, no unnecessary drama, just the unspoken understanding that he had upheld their collective standards under trying circumstances. "Heard you had an incident on duty," his company sergeant major remarked casually. "All squared away now?" "Yes, sir," Marwood replied. "Medical has cleared me for regular duty tomorrow." The sergeant major nodded, the brief exchange containing volumes of professional respect that required no elaboration. "Good man, the regiment is pleased with your conduct." That evening, his commanding officer arrived with news that the palace had taken special notice of the day's events. "The king has been briefed on the incident," the officer informed him. "He expressed particular appreciation for the manner in which you upheld regimental standards under difficult circumstances." Marwood acknowledged the information with a crisp, "Thank you, sir," his expression betraying no particular pride or satisfaction, merely the quiet assurance of a professional who had done precisely what his duty required. Nothing more, nothing less. The incident had made headlines in both British and American media, with public reaction overwhelmingly supportive of Marwood and condemnatory of Melanie's behaviour. The Sun ran with the headline, "Unmoved, Guards' Iron Discipline Defeats Tourists' Pepper Spray Attack," while the Times offered a more reserved but equally admiring "Royal Guard exemplifies military bearing under assault." American outlets picked up the story with headlines ranging from the respectful "British Guard demonstrates extraordinary restraint" to the more sensationalist "Arizona Karen attacks Royal Guard, gets royal punishment." Social commentators noted how the incident highlighted cultural differences in understanding military service and respecting traditions. Several veteran organisations issued statements praising Marwood's composure and using the opportunity to educate the public about the reality behind ceremonial duties. In the days that followed, visitors to Horse Guards Parade demonstrated notably improved behaviour, with many tourists making a point of maintaining respectful distances and hushing children who became too exuberant. Tour guides incorporated the incident into their narratives as a teachable moment about proper decorum around military personnel. One American family was overheard telling their children, Remember, these are real soldiers doing a real job. They deserve our respect, not our entertainment. The incident had, ironically, achieved what countless polite signs and barriers had failed to accomplish: a genuine appreciation for the human beings standing beneath the ceremonial uniforms. What would you do if you witnessed someone disrespecting a royal guard? Would you intervene, or would you simply watch and record? The dedication these guards demonstrate goes far beyond the ceremonial aspect of their duty. They are trained soldiers who maintain their discipline even under direct attack, as Sergeant Marwood so powerfully demonstrated. The next time you visit a ceremonial guard post, remember that beneath the impressive uniform stands a person who has chosen to serve their country through both combat deployments and ceremonial duties. The respect they deserve isn't just for the tradition they represent, but for the individuals they are. If you found this story powerful, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more authentic accounts of Royal Guard incidents that teach us about respect, discipline, and tradition. Press the bell icon to be notified immediately when we post our next video. Share this story with someone who appreciates the dedication of military personnel around the world. Sometimes the most important battles they fight are the quiet ones, where duty and discipline triumph over provocation and disrespect. What do you think is the most impressive quality displayed by Royal Guards during their duty? Have you ever witnessed someone disrespecting traditions or uniformed personnel, and how did others respond? Let us know in the comments below. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen now. We'll be back tomorrow with another story that reminds us what true service means.